Hello and a very warm welcome. Thanks for tuning into News 9 Live. I'm Kabir Naqvi and you're watching this special broadcast of top stories from our studios here in the National Capital Region. Like always, an expansive list of stories for you to understand and catch the news pulse of the day. We will be cutting across to the 69th day of the West Asian conflict between Israel and Hamas. We will be telling you that the Trump's trial has gotten over. A verdict is expected within a month, even as Joe Biden's impeachment probe has been formally and officially authorized by the U.S. House of Representatives. Some Christmas Advent-based stories, some stories from the world of sports, climate change, and COP-28 is also going to be our focus. But first and foremost, let's shift our focus to what's happening back at home, the major parliament breach. Now, the parliament witnessed uproar on the security breach as soon as it resumed this very morning. Speaker Om Birla and Defence Minister Rajnath Singh reassured the House, but the opposition kept on sloganeering, demanding a full statement from the government. Listen in to some of these excerpts from what transpired in the lower house of the parliament today.
माननीय सदस्यगण, मुझे सभा को सूचित करना है कि निम्नलिखित निर्वाचित सदस्यों ने लोकसभा की सदस्यता से त्यागपत्र दे दिया है। तेलंगाना के मेडक संसदीय निर्वाचन क्षेत्र से निर्वाचित श्री कोथा प्रभाकर रेड्डी, तेलंगाना के नलगोड़ा संसदीय क्षेत्र से निर्वाचित श्री उत्तम कुमार रेड्डी, मैंने 13 दिसंबर 2023 से उनके त्यागपत्र को स्वीकार कर लिया है।
सबने उसको कंडम किया है। बहुत ही दुर्भाग्यपूर्ण घटना है, इसमें कहीं दो मत नहीं है। और आपने तुरंत इसका संज्ञान लेते हुए इस मामले की पूरी जांच का जो है आदेश दे दिया है। मैं समझता हूं कि भविष्य में हम सारे सांसद, चाहे वो पक्ष के हों अथवा प्रतिपक्ष के हों, सभी को सावधानी बरतने की आवश्यकता है ताकि जिनको भी हम पास देते हैं ऐसे व्यक्ति को पास न दिया जाए जो जाकर इस प्रकार की अराजक स्थिति संसद भवन के अंदर पैदा कर दे। यह हम सभी को, केवल सत्ता पक्ष ही नहीं बल्कि दूसरे पक्ष के लोगों को भी यह सावधानी बरतने की जरूरत है। और आपने तुरंत संज्ञान लेकर इस मामले का, अध्यक्ष महोदय, आपने जांच का आदेश दिया है और अन्य भी जो प्रिकॉशन भविष्य में लिए जा सकते हैं वह लिए जाएंगे। और अध्यक्ष महोदय, आपकी जानकारी में मैं यह भी लाना चाहता हूं कि यह हमारा ये पुराना संसद भवन है, उसमें भी इस प्रकार से बराबर जैसे नारेबाजी की घटनाएं और पेपर फेंकना और तरह तरह की जंपिंग की घटनाएं पिछले जो हमारा पहले का पार्लियामेंट है उसमें भी पहले हो चुकी हैं। मैं समझता हूं कि सभी को मिलकर इस घटना को कंडेम करना चाहिए और जांच रिपोर्ट जो आपने दी है और साथ ही भविष्य में क्या क्या प्रिकॉशंस लिए जाने चाहिए इसका भी आपने निर्देश दिया है अध्यक्ष महोदय। तो मैं समझता हूं कि इस प्रकार से इस संसद के अंदर अराजक स्थिति पैदा करने का कोई औचित्य नहीं है।
सर, मैं इस बारे में, एक तो जो कल की घटना घटी है वो सुरक्षा से संबंधित, उसमें बदलाव की जरूरत है। और जो लोग इस समय भी राजनीति कर रहे हैं उनको मैं चाहता हूं वो देश के लिए काम करें। साहब, मैं मंत्री जी से पूछना चाहता हूं कि जो गंगा जी हरिद्वार से जहां से निकलती है और आखिर तक जाने में जो पॉल्यूशन से संबंधित हैं, क्या एसटीपी प्लांट के द्वारा ही निकला गया सफाई होने के बाद पानी गंगा में डलता है? क्या पूरे आंकड़े उनके पास हैं? मैं जानना चाहता हूं।
Well, now the disturbance in the parliament is currently under the purview of the Delhi Police's anti-terror unit. The Delhi Police's special cell has registered the case under the UAPA section as well. Now take a look at this. All the accused are being transferred to the special cell for further investigation. Some of those visuals of when the forensics analysis team was inside the parliamentary premises till late on in the night. Numerous special cell teams are actively involved in conducting raids at various locations. Loksabha Secretariat has suspended 7 personnel for yesterday's security lapse. Now, the Home Ministry has set up a committee to probe the incident. And take a look at this. The committee is going to be headed by CRPF DG Anish Dayal. He is going to be commissioning and commencing the investigation promptly. The two individuals, Sagar Sharma and D. Manoranjan, that deployed yellow smoke canisters within the Lok Sabha, while Neelam Devi and Amol Shinde burst red and yellow canisters outside the parliament. One of the accused obtained entrance passes, visitor passes, through BJP MP Pratap Simha, who plans to meet with Lok Sabha Speaker Om Birla to clarify his role amidst all of this. Now, we showed you exactly what transpired this very morning in the Lok Sabha. Take a look at the Rajya Sabha proceedings, because the upper house also witnessed uproar from the parliament security breach. Take a look.
Papers to be laid on the table. Murugan.
Sir, with your kind permission, I rise to lay on the table of the House the papers mentioned against the name of my senior colleague Sri Anurag Singh Thakur at serial number 1 of today's revised list of business pertaining the Department of Information Broadcasting. Thank you.
Shri Kiren Rijuji.
Sir, with your permission, I rise to lay on the table of the House the papers mentioned against my name at serial number 1A of today's revised list of business in Rajya Sabha pertaining to Ministry of Earth Sciences.
Dr. Jitendra Singh.
महोदय, आपकी अनुमति से मैं आज की संशोधित कार्यवली की क्रम संख्या 2 पर मेरे नाम के आगे सूचीबद्ध कागजात सभा पटल पर रखता हूं। धन्यवाद सभापति महोदय।
श्री अर्जुन राम मेघवाल।
With your permission, I rise to lay the papers listed against my name at serial number 3 in today's list of business. Thank you.
Shri V. Muralidharan.
Respected Chairman, sir, with your permission, on behalf of my colleague Sri Ashwini Kumar Chaubeji, I rise to lay the papers listed against his name at serial number 4 in today's revised list of business.
Shri Arjun Ram Meghwal.
Honorable Chairman, sir, with your permission, on behalf of my colleague Srimati Meenakshi Lekhi, I rise to lay the papers listed against her name at serial number 5 in today's revised list of the business. Thank you.
Shri रामेश्वर तेली।
मैं आपका अनुमति से आज की संशोधित कार्यसूची में मेरे नाम के सामने क्रम संख्या 6 पर वर्णित दस्तावेज सदन के पटल पर रखता हूं।
श्री बीएल वर्मा।
आदरणीय सभापति महोदय, मैं आपकी अनुमति से आज की राज्यसभा की संशोधित कार्यवली में क्रम संख्या 7 पर अपने नाम के सम्मुख अंकित प्रपत्र हिंदी और अंग्रेजी में सभा पटल पर रखता हूं।
डॉक्टर राजकुमार रंजन सिंह।
Honorable Chairman, with your permission, I rise to lay on the table of the House the paper listed against my name at serial number 8 in today's revised list of business.
Reports of the department-related Parliamentary Standing Committee on Consumer Affairs, Food and Public Distribution, श्री बाबूराम निषाद।
कार्य सूची में मेरे नाम के सम्मुख यथा सूचीबद्ध उपभोक्ता मामले, खाद्य और सार्वजनिक वितरण संबंधी स्थायी समिति का 35वां और 36वां प्रतिवेदन अंग्रेजी और हिंदी संस्करण सभा पटल पर रखता हूं।
Statements of the department-related Parliament Standing Committee on Consumer Affairs, Food.
Well, we'll have to cut across to the Rajya Sabha live proceedings as and when they're happening. Let's quickly cut across to the upper house of the parliament. Well, it seems like we're being told that the upper house, the proceedings of the Rajya Sabha have been adjourned till about 2 p.m. ladies and gentlemen. So 2 p.m. you can count on News 9 to come back to the parliamentary proceedings. Uproar in the lower house and the upper house over the security breach in the parliamentary premises.
Parliamentary Standing Committee on Railways, Shri Narhari Amin.
मैं आज की कार्यसूची में मेरे नाम के सामने यथा सचिवबुद्ध रेलवे भूमि विकास प्राधिकरण का कार्य निष्पादन के संबंध में रेल संबंधी साहित्य समिति के 16वें प्रतिवेदन 70वीं लोकसभा में अंतर्विष्ट समुचित और सिफारिशों पर सरकार द्वारा की गई कार्यवाही के संबंध में समिति के 70वें प्रतिवेदन हिंदी और अंग्रेजी संस्करण को सभा पटल पर रखता हूं।
Report of the department-related Parliamentary Standing Committee on Rural Development and Panchayati Raj, Shri Ajay Pratap Singh.
सभापति महोदय, मैं आज की कार्यसूची में मेरे नाम के सम्मुख यथा सूचीबद्ध ग्रामीण विकास एवं पंचायती राज संबंधी स्थायी समिति का 36वां प्रतिवेदन हिंदी और अंग्रेजी संस्करण सभा पटल पर रखता हूं।
Statements of the department related Parliament Standing Committee on Rural Development and Panchayati Raj, श्री अजय प्रताप सिंह।
सभापति महोदय, मैं आज की कार्यसूची में मेरे नाम के सम्मुख यथा सूचीबद्ध ग्रामीण विकास एवं पंचायती राज संबंधी स्थायी समिति के की गई कार्रवाई प्रतिवेदनों में अंतर्विष्ट सिफारिशों पर आगे की गई कार्रवाई को दर्शाने वाली की गई कार्रवाई विवरण हिंदी और अंग्रेजी संस्करण सभा पटल पर रखता हूं।
Reports of the Committee on Welfare of Other Backward Classes, श्री राजेंद्र गहलोत।
माननीय अध्यक्ष महोदय, मैं आज की कार्यसूची में अपने नाम के सामने यथा सूचीबद्ध अन्य पिछड़े वर्ग के कल्याण संबंधी समिति के 26वें 27वें प्रतिवेदन की हिंदी और अंग्रेजी संस्करण की एक प्रति सभा पटल पर रखता हूं।
Statements of the Committee on Welfare of Other Backward Classes, श्री राजेंद्र गहलोत। Yes, Mr. Rajendra Gehlot.
मेरे पास तो एक ही है।
So that's your problem, not mine.
दूसरा है नहीं ना, एक ही दिया था हमने। रिपीट। अध्यक्ष महोदय, मैं आज की कार्यसूची में अपने नाम के सामने यथा सूचीबद्ध अन्य पिछड़े वर्ग के कल्याण संबंधी समिति 26वें और 27वें प्रतिवेदन की हिंदी और अंग्रेजी संस्करण की एक प्रति सभा पटल पर रखता हूं।
That's better. Report of the Committee on the Welfare of Scheduled Caste and Scheduled Tribes, श्री कामाख्या प्रसाद तासा।
Meanwhile, as we wait for both the houses to reconvene, they've been adjourned. Rajya Sabha and Lok Sabha, 2 p.m. is when they are going to commence again. Let's try and understand what helped the 4 people get inside the parliamentary premises. How did they carry out this smoke bomb parliamentary breach? After the significant security breach in the parliament, the lingering question certainly is, how did the 2 men manage to navigate layers of security? Take a look at this. Sources indicate that Sagar and Manoranjan accessed the gallery situated just over 10 feet above the members of parliament with no significant barrier. The security staff was overwhelmed by the hundreds of daily visitors and was limited with only 176 out of the 301 officers deployed. On the day of the particular incident, 13th of December, the 2 men concealed colored smoke canisters inside their shoes. We've got pictures of how they've concealed the smoke canisters inside their shoes, an area that is typically not checked. How did they dodge the security? Number 1, the personnel were already overwhelmed because not all 300 of them were working, just about 170 of them, daily visitors at an unprecedented high. And at the same time, the smoke canisters were hidden inside their shoes, which is an area that is not typically checked. But what's more important is the fact that they pretty much went inside the visitors gallery with no barrier at all. And whilst we're at it, let's also talk about the 6 accused. Now, the 6 accused hail from different states. They were acquainted with each other, though, and shared a common frustration over issues such as the farmers' protest, the Manipur crisis, and the unemployment in general. Take a look at this. Surprisingly, their family members, most of them, were unaware of their activities. Now, all of them are currently unemployed. Neelam, one of the accused, claimed to be a student that was preparing for competitive exams after completing her master's, a bachelor's, a master's in education, an MPhil, and clearing her NET examination as well. On the other hand, Amol, a resident of Maharashtra's Latur, and Manoranjan D from Mysuru, Pratap Simha's constituency, had known each other. These two people had known each other. Amol, a resident of Maharashtra's Latur, and Manoranjan D from Mysuru, who is also from Pratap Simha's constituency, the man and the member of parliament who had signed the visitor passes. He is soon going to be meeting Om Birla and clarifying his role as well. But these two accused had known each other for the past 4 years via social media, ladies and gentlemen. Meanwhile, there's another angle at play over here. Take a look at this. Farmer organizations in Haryana have demanded accused Neelam's release and threatened protest if she is not released promptly. The protest has been called at the Uchchana in Jind, from where Neelam herself hails. Take a look at some of these visuals on your screens, ladies and gentlemen. This is that particular PG where Neelam used to stay. And in the entire area, the farmers' unions, the farmer organizations have demanded the accused Neelam's release and threatened protests if she is not released promptly. Meanwhile, a fifth accused in the case, Lalit, was located in Neemrana but managed to evade capture when the police's special cell team reached the Gandala village in Neemrana. The search for Lalit continues. In the meantime, 2 special investigation teams are directly been pushed in and focused on the apprehension of Lalit, who is currently absconding. Now, the police probe will focus on key aspects of the case. Some of them will put that out on your screens. Ladies and gentlemen, take a look. They will examine the educational backgrounds of all the accused, of all the 6 accused, their involvement in the activities over the past year, such as protests, rallies, or public events. And what they're also going to be probing is their recent visits to the national capital, specifically if they approach the Parliament House at all or not. The investigation will extensively check their mobile phones, laptops, or any digital devices with assistance from the IFSO unit of the special cell. Social media activity is going to be of key focus, and the agency will scrutinize their family members for information on their ideologies or affiliations as well. Now, another important aspect that we must put forth in front of the viewers, because according to initial investigations, the accused conducted a recce outside the parliament in advance and were associated with a social media page called Bhagat Singh Fan Club. Now, the group met about 1.5 years ago in Mysuru. This is what we're picking up. And members, including Sagar, arrived in the national capital on the 10th of December. Now, what initial reports and probe agencies are telling us is that at the moment, the main conspirator of this case is still at large. It is yet to be ascertained who is the mastermind of this case. Is it one of these 6 accused? Or if the probe and the initial findings are anything to go by, are we yet to find out who the real mastermind is? We'll continue to bring you all the latest details as the live proceedings in the parliament begin, and on this major security breach of the parliamentary premises on the day of the 2001 parliament attack, a day when floral tributes were given and the event was commemorated. Voucher News 9 to bring you the latest, not jumping the gun, but corroborated news. Meanwhile, shifting our focus to some other important developments vis-a-vis India's global diplomacy. Now, India has firmly rejected the statement from the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, the OIC. This on a judgment by the Indian Supreme Court, where it legally upheld the constitutionality of the abrogation of Article 370 that took away J&K's special autonomy. Now, India, in its response, said that OIC's statement is both ill-informed and ill-intended. The Ministry of External Affairs pointed out that OIC issued this statement at the behest of a nation with a track record of human rights violation and active promotion of cross-border terrorism. India asserts that such actions by the OIC only serve to undermine the grouping's credibility. Meanwhile, moving on, the central government has assured the Supreme Court that guidelines will soon be in place to regulate the seizure of phones and digital devices, particularly those belonging to media professionals and journalists. This assurance came after a 2-year delay since the initial petitions was filed. Now, the court had directed the government to create these guidelines back in November. However, there has been much criticism over the time that has been taken to respond. The Additional Solicitor General informed the bench of justices that a committee has been formed and requested more time to formulate the guidelines. Meanwhile, the issue gained traction following the seizure of 300 devices from 90 journalists associated with NewsClick. Some of those raid visuals that we played back from our archive, which is NewsClick, a digital news organization, was raided, and allegations against the organization included fundraising for terrorist activities and promoting hostility between different groups. And as we draw closer to the inauguration of the Ram Temple in Ayodhya on January 22nd next year, excitement resonates far and wide. And from Surat, over 400 families will be participating in the grand Kundi Yagya under Jagat Guru Ram Bahadur Acharya's guidance. Also, a 26,000-kilometer Ram Rath Yatra, including water from 75 holy rivers, which is en route to Ayodhya, with Surat's Tapi River now making a symbolic contribution. Meanwhile, ladies and gentlemen, contributing to the grand ceremony, Nitya Gopal Das's Gaushala will send milk for the Pran Pratishtha Mahotsav of Ram Lala. Milk from this Gaushala is going to be sent across to Ayodhya. On the other hand, the Kinnar Ekta Samiti in Aligarh, it has requested Prime Minister Narendra Modi to invite them to participate in the Pran Pratishtha ceremony in Ayodhya. Their plea echoes the call of inclusivity and unity in celebrating this momentous event. January 22nd, 2024, inauguration of the Grand Ram Temple. Like we mentioned, climate change is of grave significance. We make it a point here on News 9 to talk about it every day, and what better to begin this particular segment with a landmark shift at COP-28. In a historic accord at the COP-28 summit in Dubai, almost 200 nations united, pledging to move away from fossil fuels. This groundbreaking agreement marks a pivotal departure from oil dependence, addressing imminent climate threats. After 2 weeks of intense negotiations, the deal signals a global commitment to alternative energy. COP-28 President Sultan Al Jaber hails it as historic, emphasizing the need for concrete actions. Now, the agreement explicitly outlines a transition to renewable energy sources, targeting net zero emissions by 2050. Emphasizing equitable progress, the deal calls for accelerated renewable energy capacities by 2030 and explores carbon capture technologies. Despite OPEC's resistance, the deal receives acclaim globally. Norway's foreign minister lauds it as a pivotal acknowledgement and confrontation of transitioning from fossil fuels. The same tone has been applied by the European Union and several other of these 200 nations that have united to move away from fossil fuels by the year 2050.
I think this is a global turning point. For the first time, the world is committing to transition away from fossil fuels. For the first time, there is a loss and damage fund to support the most vulnerable countries. So this has the potential to be the beginning of a new era, the post-fossil era. Let's celebrate this. Europe is at the forefront of it, investing in clean and homegrown energy for all. This is the right direction of travel.
We have confronted realities and we have set the world in the right direction. We have given it a robust action plan to keep 1.5 within reach. It is a plan that is led by the science. It is a balanced plan that tackles emissions, bridges the gap on adaptation, reimagines global finance, and delivers on loss and damage. Enhanced, balanced, but make no mistake, historic package to accelerate climate action. It is the UAE consensus. An agreement is only as good as its implementation. We are what we do, not what we say.
Now, representatives from nearly 200 countries agreed at the COP-28 climate summit to begin reducing global consumption of fossil fuels to avert the worst of climate change. Next up is a complete report of the key takeaways from COP-28.
I must say that you did it. You delivered.
After 2 weeks of hard-fought debate, nations struck a historic deal at COP28 in Dubai. The Pact aims to transition the global economy away from fossil fuels. Here are some key takeaways. This is the first time the world has expressed a unified desire to eventually end the use of fossil fuels. The provision calls for, quote, transitioning away from fossil fuels in energy systems in a just, orderly, and equitable manner, with the goal of achieving net zero by 2050. While it is sending a resounding signal to international markets, it will not immediately destroy oil consumption or shrink prices. However, incremental policy moves and shifting investment trends over time could ensure a longer-term transformation of the energy economy. The Pact also had rewards for oil producers. There's a clear acknowledgement that technologies like carbon capture can reduce the climate impact of oil, natural gas, and coal. Boosting such technologies was highlighted in a list of actions that countries should take to fight climate change. A source familiar with Saudi thinking said the kingdom could accept the deal because it provides a menu for every country to follow its own pathway. Carbon capture remains very expensive in certain applications. It's also never been proven at the vast global scale needed to have a significant impact. The Pact is missing any additional financing to help developing nations transition away from fossil fuels. Money to help poor, climate-vulnerable countries adapt to the impacts of climate change was also lacking. However, there was a victory at the start of the summit for poor nations hit by climate disaster when delegates adopted a new fund to help them cope with loss and damages. The US, European Union, and scores of other countries said the deal maintained a chance of limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius above the pre-industrial average. But getting there will be tough. It would require cutting emissions nearly in half in just 6 years, and making it to net zero by 2050. The draft calls for countries to do so, but some, like the Alliance of Small Island States, questioned whether it will happen.
Time for me to slip into a quick break here, ladies and gentlemen. But on the other side, our full-blown segment on the West Asian conflict between Israel and Hamas. Don't go anywhere.
The scale of the attack was something that we were surprised at. David Hadley was a double agent. The Americans did not want him to be fully exposed, so all that he probably shared with the Americans was not shared with us in terms of intelligence. If we had that, I'm sure that we would have been able to deal with the situation far better.
This and more streaming on world's first news OTT, News 9+. Download now.
Bangalore traffic is an example of something that has gone wrong with our system.
We have more than 50 flyovers in Bangalore city. If flyover is a solution to traffic problem, Bangalore should not have traffic problem.
According to TomTom Traffic Index 2022, Bangalore is ranked as the second worst city in the world when it comes to traffic.
The speed limit at the ORR is 80 kilometers per hour, but our vehicle has only moved 10 kilometers per hour.
What Bangalore needs is a surgery, but what we have been offered repeatedly are band-aids.
Only on the world's first news OTT. News 9 Plus, ahead of the curve.
Yes, the scale of the attack surprised us.
When you get a series of alerts, 16 intelligence alerts, if Maharashtra government at that time had alerted the Coast Guard and the Navy, this 2611 would not have happened at all.
And one of the details they had planned was to use these dhagas to mislead the investigative agencies.
All this was to be presented as a Hindu terror.
So it was a Pakistan operation. The LET was the front end.
As the attacks were on, it was clear that they were planned and launched from Pakistani territory.
For all of those victims of terror that was exported from Pakistan over the years, including but not limited to 2611.
This and more, streaming on world's first news OTT, News 9 Plus. Download now.
The following content may contain visuals that are disturbing, graphic, or sensitive in nature. Viewer discretion is advised. This material is intended for mature audiences and may not be suitable for all viewers. Please exercise caution while watching, and if you find such content distressing, we recommend discontinuing viewing. This disclaimer is provided to ensure awareness and to prioritize viewer well-being. Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. You're watching News 9 Live. Now, the war between Israel and Hamas has entered its 69th day. Before we get into the expanded portions, let's get you the latest updates from the war front on your screens first. 10 Israeli soldiers were killed in one of the worst combat losses since late October for the Israeli Defense Forces. Meanwhile, Benjamin Netanyahu, Israeli Prime Minister, has vowed to continue the fight right until the end. Yoav Gallant, Israel's defense minister, says no one determines for Israel what it needs to do. Meanwhile, Israel continues its bombardment across the Gaza Strip. This even as National Security Advisor for the United States, Jake Sullivan, he's met with Saudi Crown Prince and discussed Gaza crisis ahead of his Israel visit. He's soon going to be in Israel as well. Meanwhile, United States has imposed new sanctions on various Hamas officials. This even as Gaza hospitals receive a high number of casualties on Wednesday. Israel announced its worst combat losses for more than a month after an ambush in the ruins of Gaza City and faced growing diplomatic isolation as civilian deaths mounted and a humanitarian catastrophe worsened.
The Israeli military on Wednesday released this footage purporting to show fierce house-to-house battles with Hamas militants in the shell-shocked Shujaiya district of Gaza City. And it showcases how, despite Israel's overwhelming superiority in the air, in tanks, and with artillery, Palestinian resistance remains lethal. Underscoring that reality, Israel said on Wednesday 10 of its soldiers were killed in an ambush in the prior 24 hours in an operation to rescue another group of soldiers that came under fire. Among those killed were Lieutenant Colonel Tomer Grinberg, who was buried on Wednesday. It was the worst one-day loss since 15 soldiers were killed on October 31st. Fighting has only intensified amid the rubble in the northern part of the Gaza Strip, where Israel had previously claimed its military objectives had been largely met. Israel's devastating assault on Gaza has killed more than 18,000 Palestinians, according to the Gaza Health Ministry, including thousands of young children. This body was recovered from the rubble of an airstrike in Rafah. This man cries, "These are children. Children. Do they kill anyone other than children?" The death toll has sparked an international outcry. The United Nations General Assembly this week passed a resolution calling for an immediate ceasefire. Israel's foreign minister on Wednesday said it would wage war on Hamas with or without international support after militants launched a surprise attack on October 7th, rampaging through Israeli communities, killing 1,200 people and taking hundreds of hostages. Gazans fleeing destruction have crowded into shelters in the south, overwhelming the health system already strained by a lack of fuel and medicine. Lynn Hastings is the United Nations humanitarian coordinator for the occupied Palestinian territories.
We all know that the healthcare system is or has collapsed. We've got a textbook formula for epidemics and a public health disaster. This is in part, of course, because the shelters have long ago exceeded their full capacity, with people lining up for hours just to get to a toilet, one toilet available for hundreds of people. You can imagine what the sanitation conditions are like as a result.
White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan plans to travel to Israel on Thursday and Friday to meet with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu amid U.S. efforts to pressure Israel to dial back what President Joe Biden has called the, quote, indiscriminate bombing of Gaza.
Meanwhile, Israelis thronged the streets in Tel Aviv, protesting to demand the release of remaining Hamas hostages. Thousands of them rallying against the government's handling of the Hamas hostage crisis. Many protesters called upon Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to step down.
This dance is a reminder that nearly 140 hostages are still believed to be held in Gaza. Among them is 26-year-old Noah Argamani, whose terminally ill mother recently pleaded to see her daughter one last time.
Each day that is passing, they suffer more and more.
We are in what has become known as Hostages Square. Located in central Tel Aviv, it's become the place people gather to demand the return of those taken during the October 7th Hamas terror attacks. Many here, including Shimrit Schiffer, believe this is what their government needs to do to meet that demand.
To fight them hard, Hamas, because that's the way they understand. No other way. They understand the way of power. And if that's the way to get our people back, so that's the way I expect my government to act.
Nearby, hundreds of protesters called for that same government to be replaced. Here, it's not just hostages that need to be freed, but the whole state, as this sign reads.
They're shouting slogans like impeachment now, and the government has blood on its hands. After 16 years in power, the people here no longer believe that Prime Minister Netanyahu is the right person to lead the country, especially in this moment.
Netanyahu needs to say, it was my responsibility, I was in charge, and I'm going to resign. If he says so, it can perhaps live a few more months until the end of the war.
Among the people out on the streets today, there's also mounting anger at the way the Netanyahu government is handling the conflict with Hamas.
I think the real argument in Israel right now is between people who see themselves living here in peace and are willing to make the sacrifice to get there, And the people who don't, the people who feel, if you feel content living on the sword, that's how we say it in Hebrew, like if you feel content living in war, I have nothing in common with you. And there are too many people in the government who feel that way.
Netanyahu, of course, at first thinks about his interest. We call to ceasefire, because only in ceasefire we can talk and make a good deal to bring all of the hostages home. All the time it's war, continue, it's no deal.
The protesters continued their march through the streets of Tel Aviv until they reached Hostages Square. They may have differing opinions on Israel's leadership, but they are one in their demand: bring the hostages home. Among those already here is 85-year-old Yocheved Lifshitz, a former hostage, one of the first to be released from Gaza, a living, walking sign of hope for the many still waiting for their loved ones to return.
Meanwhile, on the other hand, a set of Israeli citizens said that the army should not back off from its unrelenting offensive to crush Hamas, despite the UN General Assembly's ceasefire call. Take a look at this next report.
Israelis are watching a rising number of their soldiers killed fighting in Gaza and growing international condemnation over the Palestinian death toll. But their leaders remain resolute in their commitment to destroy the Hamas Islamist group and retrieve an estimated 100 Israeli hostages. Footage released by the Israeli government showed Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu telling soldiers he was committed to annihilating Hamas, saying, quote, "I say this in the face of great pain, but also in the face of international pressures. Nothing will stop us. We will go to the end, to the victory, no less than that." And it's a message that seems to resonate with many Israelis.
Israel is paying an incredibly high price with all these young, precious soldiers being killed.
Saadia Gopstein is an attorney in Jerusalem.
What choice do we have? This is a fight for our survival.
Many Israelis acknowledge the devastating toll of the campaign on Palestinian civilians living in Gaza.
I think the civilian death toll, it's horrendous. It's awful. It's terrible. But again, we didn't start this.
However, they remain committed to victory.
It's awful. It's awful that there's so many civilian casualties, and if we could, we're doing our very best to try and avoid them. But this is war, and that's what happens in war.
Israel's invasion of Gaza has killed more than 18,000 Palestinians. It came in retaliation after Hamas fighters assaulted Israeli communities on October 7th, killing 1,200 and taking hundreds more captive. This week's United Nations resolution calling for an immediate ceasefire has been rejected by Israel. That sentiment seems to span both the right and the left of the political spectrum among Israeli Jews. Tamar Herman is a political science professor at the Israel Democracy Institute.
Indeed, the sense of self-righteousness in a way that we are entitled to do everything in order to serve our security makes Israelis, even on the left, less sensitive to what is happening to the citizens in Gaza.
Along with capturing or killing the Hamas commanders who planned the October 7th rampage, a goal of Israel's war is to bring back hostages grabbed by the militants and taken to Gaza.
Right now, we didn't achieve neither the first nor the second. And therefore, most of the people are ready to continue until the point where at least one of the major aims is achieved.
Meanwhile, going back to the big story, new security rules have been implemented in Parliament following the security breach. Separate entry rules have been implemented for different people. Entry of officials, including Cabinet Secretary, Home Secretary, will now be through Shardul and Garuda gates only. Earlier, all these members of Parliament used to go through the Makar Dwar. The Prime Minister will enter from Gaj Dwar, the Speaker from Hans Dwar, the Rajya Sabha Chairman from the Ashwa Dwar. New security rules, ladies and gentlemen. All these in place that have been implemented after the breach that happened yesterday. In terms of the new rules that have been put in place, separate entry rules have been implemented for different people. This includes entry of officials, including Cabinet Secretary, the Home Secretary. It is now going to happen through Shardul and Garuda gates. Earlier, all the members of Parliament used to go through the Makar Dwar, but now the Prime Minister is going to be entering from the Gaj Dwar, the Speaker from the Hans Dwar, and the Rajya Sabha Chairman and the Vice President from Ashwa Dwar. And with that, it's a wrap on this edition of Top Stories. Meanwhile, ladies and gentlemen, even as we go, take a look at this little documentary snippet. Pakistan is training women as intelligence operatives to entrap influential Indians, soliciting confidential information in exchange for sexual favors. Experts caution defense personnel and scientists against virtual romantic involvement and call for heightened government monitoring of Indian SIM card sales. Take a look at our exclusive stories. Many thanks for watching this episode.
I recently received a friend request from Mahira Sharma. Now, we seem to have a lot of friends in common on social media.